Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Executive Director of the Nobel Peace Center, Kjersti Fløgstad.
Thank you so much. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nobel Peace Center on this special day. We are so pleased to have you here to mark the World Press Freedom Day, even if the results that we're going to hear perhaps are not quite as we would have liked them to be. This is a day to celebrate the fundamental principle of press freedom and the importance of the free speech and freedom of information for peace and democracy. It's also a day to defend the media workers facing attacks on their independence and their safety, and a day to remember the journalists who have lost their lives while doing their job. On your way in here today, you may have seen the little exhibition outside the Nobel Peace Center telling the story of 3 brave journalists who were killed last year just for doing their job. The exhibition is made in cooperation with Narges and the Reporters Without Borders. Being a journalist is still one of the world's most dangerous occupations. Free and independent journalism is a prerequisite for a functioning democracy and therefore for peace. The connection was demonstrated by the award of the Nobel Peace Prize to the 2 journalists Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov in 2021. We, journalists, are the antidote against tyranny, Muratov said in his Nobel speech. And a few weeks later, Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine left his country's free media in ruin, and Muratov's newspaper, Novaya Gazeta, had to move into exile, and Muratov himself was forced to step down as editor. But the paper lives on, and today we are very happy to have one of Novaya Gazeta's journalists here. A warm welcome to you, Olesya Shmagin. Narges Mohammadi, who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize last December, is also a journalist. As a physics student in the 1990s, she became both an activist and a journalist, writing for liberal and reformist publications, many of them illegal. And since 2010, Narges has spent most of her time in prison. But that has not stopped her from producing important journalism. Both her documentary project, White Torture, and her writings to inspire women life freedom movement have reached a wide audience and have had great impact. Narges' story shows us the danger-free journalism represents for dictators and the courage of the journalists who keep on telling their stories despite all efforts to silence them. Iran and Russia are 2 of the worst countries for journalists. And our second panelist today has, through her work as a documentary filmmaker, learned how dangerous life can be for an investigative journalist in Iran. Welcome to you too, Nahid Persian Savistani. I'm looking very much forward to listening to you and to the presentation of the new World Press Freedom Index. Ami Hedenborg from Reporters Without Borders Sweden is here, and she has the brand new index with her. So welcome to you too, Ami. So we have very interesting and impactful presentations to listen to today. But first, I want to introduce you to our dear partner on this event, the ambassador of the Czech Republic in Oslo, David Cervenka. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kjersti, and a big thanks to Nobel Peace Center for organizing this timely event. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends following us online. Media freedom is being challenged every day. Journalists intimidated and threatened as we speak. Independent media systematically oppressed in far too many places. This year alone, 569 journalists and media workers were detained. 12 were killed. In short, it has been going from bad to worse during past decade. We've also seen an unprecedented growth in fake industry, producing disinformation propaganda, blurring the difference between true and false, tampering with public opinion, as we have recently experienced with Voice of Europe propaganda network in a number of European countries, including my own, the Czech Republic. There will be over 60 elections around the globe this year. The disturbing question is, how can the general public make informed decisions in these elections if they cannot trust the information? And how do we reconcile the fact that access to information is a human right? Coming from a country that suffered from oppressive regimes in past century, Czechs know very well what's the value of freedom of expression and free media. Czechia has therefore been for over 3 decades proudly promoting human rights and as an engaged member of Media Freedom Coalition, actively supporting independent journalists at home as well as abroad. It is a debt that each of us feels that we have to pay back for regaining our freedom in 1989. It is a debt to those who did not accept the censorship of communist regime and risked their lives for spreading free information. As Václav Havel put it, none of those who in one way or another paid the price for our freedom should be forgotten. End of quote. Thriving civil society is a cornerstone of every democratic country. It makes the community vibrant, more resilient, as we have seen in the past and as we are seeing today, be it in Kiev, in Prague, or here in Oslo. Oppressive regimes are, on the other hand, scared of human rights defenders and independent journalists, for they shed light and expose the truth. I'm very much looking forward to the debate and to learn more about the current situation in Iran and Russia, home countries of two recent laureate of Nobel Peace Prize. Dear friends, let me end on a positive note. I would like to congratulate Norway for securing, once again, #1 place in the Media Freedom Index. The celebrations of 2024 World Press Freedom Day in Oslo will not end with this event. On behalf of our partners, it is my great pleasure to invite you to an opening of International Human Rights Film Festival, One World Echoes, in Oslo Cinematheque this evening. One World is a Czech human rights festival that throughout the past 25 years has become the world's largest festival of its kind. Let's watch a teaser of the opening film, Son of Mullah, by Nahid Persson-Sevastani, about an Iranian journalist that fled to Europe after opposing the regime.
الان بابام بهم زنگ زد یه جوری حرف زد که انگار داره خداحافظی میکنه.
همین آدما که دارن حرف مذهب و حرف دین و حرف خدا و پیغمبر و این چیزا دارن میزنن خودشون آلوده شدن به سیاست. ایران بزرگترین بازار پولشویی جهان دیگه. بیشترین دزدی‌ها هم الان بچه‌های خامنه‌ای دارن تو کشور انجام.
بزرگترین اختلاس تاریخ ایران مطالب بیشتری رو و اسناد و مدارک بیشتری رو میذاریم.
ببین تمام قدس الان امروز دستورالعمل دادن میخوان بزننت.
میدونید اینجا جمهوری اسلامی 300 نفر از مخالفین خودش رو ترور کرده. هیچ وقت هم رسانه‌ای نمیذارم بشه.
این نامه برام اومد نوشته بود که ما تو و خانوادت رو به زودی میکشیم.
به من هر کسی نزدیک میشه خطر دور و برشه.
میتونم هر ثانیه بابا ما دست بدم.
دوربینو خاموش میکنم. روح الله تلفن دست من میده. دوستش میگه ناهید خانم نگران نباشید. وقتی روح الله رو 3-4 ماه دیگه کشتن فیلمت خیلی معروف میشه. روح الله قهقه میخنده. ولی من خندم نمیگیره. دوستش میگه مبارزه هزینه داره خانم ناهید.
And now, please welcome Ami Hedenborg, board member of Reporters Without Borders, Sweden.
Thank you. And I was just taken again by this film, so sorry. I have had the privilege to see it, and I really encourage you all to see it. I think there's a festival this evening, right? Do we have the time? Did you say that? I just forgot. 6 o'clock, and there are places still. You can watch it, right? Okay. So please do this. This is a very, very strong film. It's very good and totally terrible. We will talk more about the film and about the situation in Iran when it comes to press freedom, or rather the lack of press freedom, as well as in Russia. But first, like in 10 minutes or something, I will do a short introduction to the World Press Freedom Index that Reporters Without Borders present every year. At this day, the World Press Freedom Day. And just some short words about Reporters Without Borders. As I guess you all know, it's an international organization, a non-profit organization that works with the mission to act for the freedom, the independence, the pluralism of journalism, and as well also defend all those who apply to these ideas. We do this in various ways. We do it with advocacy work. We do it with awareness raising. We also do it in practical terms when journalists has been maybe subjected to harassments or different violations. They can get legal aid. We also do it in practical terms like lending bulletproof vests and helmets to journalists in war zones. And today, it was founded in 1985 in Montpellier by 4 journalists. And today we have a lot of correspondents around the world. We have 6 international sections, and I am from the Swedish one. And please excuse my English, I have been awake since 4:30, so I might struggle with the words sometimes. We also have the headquarters in Paris, and we have 7 offices around the world. And what is then the Press Freedom Index? Well, yes, basically, it's a way of trying to compare the situation for press freedom enjoyed by journalists and media around the world. And how do we then define press freedom? We do it in this way, as the ability of journalists as individuals or collectives to select, produce, and disseminate news in the public interest independent of political, economic, legal, and social interference, and in the absence of threats to their physical and mental safety. And then on the basis of this definition, we try to divide the index into 5 different categories, where we sort of look at these 5 areas and give them a score from 0, which is the baddest, to 100, which is the best. And then it's like a middle value. We take all these 5, divide it into 5, and then you have the place in the ranking list, which means that you can have a very low scores in some of these, maybe in the economic context, but very high scores in the legal context, for instance. I'm just saying this so you understand that this is not a science with a list, but it's a way of understanding approximately where the countries are regarding press freedom. And here, if you have a look at the map, this is, you also see that the index is like divided into 5, I hope you say this, 5 grades, valuations, where the good situation is basically there is press freedom. There's absolute press freedom in the good situation countries, and down to the very serious, alarming red situation. And also, we don't have much time now to talk about all the countries, but I really encourage you also to go into the webpage of Reporters Without Borders to click on the countries you're interested in. Then you can see, read more about them, and you can also see all these 5, the political context, economic context, the legal frameworks, the socioeconomic context, etc. So you can really compare and read more, and also, of course, the original analysis as well, so you can see also a bit more about that. And if we try to have like a helicopter perspective and look a bit back and look at how it is today, we have what we say then a good situation in 8 countries. 10 years ago, this was 25 countries. If we look at the very serious situation, today it's 36 countries. 10 years ago, it was 19 countries. So as you see, it's really going in the wrong direction, totally. And here then you have, it's like the map, but instead you see it divided into sort of the names of the countries. So you see again the colors representing, going from the best ones to the situation where it's the worst. And if we just say something about maybe the one in the top and the one in the bottom, you can see that the European countries, and especially the Nordic countries, are still in the top. We have Norway for the 8th time in a row, I think, as number 1, best in class. Still, though, actually, at all these 5 indicators, there has been a decline. A small decline, but still a decline. And Sweden has risen, I think it's 1 point, but this is not due to we being so good. It's actually because Ireland has been so bad, because they have been jumping down from 2nd place, and this is because Sinn Féin party, they have tried to sue the Irish Times because of how they described the Hamas attack and what's happening in Gaza. So they threatened with lots of lawsuits. So they went down, and then Sweden went up a bit. So it's all sort of joined together. As well, you can see that it's actually the EU countries that are in the absolute top position. And the EU has now also a new media law that is in there just to make sure that, try to make sure that there will not be political interference within the free media. If we look a bit at the end, we have 3 new countries, although they have been in the bottom as well, but they are in the absolute bottom. This is new, because last year, instead of Afghanistan, we had Vietnam, instead of Syria, we had China, and instead of Eritrea, we had North Korea. As you see, they are still in the bottom, but these 3 countries are now considered the worst. Eritrea and Syria, no press freedom whatsoever, and also Eritrea, this is the country where you have journalists being imprisoned for the longest time. For instance, you have David Isaak, the Swedish citizen who's been there detained since 2001, and also his colleague at Zitit. Afghanistan, also terrible security situation, as well as in Syria. And you can also, something else that is also interesting is that you see 5 countries from Asian Pacific region in the bottom, and you can also see that by the top 15, there are none of the South Asia Pacific countries. They were there last year, though. And China, still the country with as the biggest country, the biggest prison for journalists. Also in there, we have the Gui Minhai, the Swedish publisher Gui Minhai is also in prison since 2015 there. I mentioned those 2 cases because these are cases that the Swedish section of Reporters Without Borders are working a lot with. There's so much I want to say, and I know we have so little time, and I also want to speak with our guests, so I'm trying to evaluate how much and how little to talk here. But again, please go into the website so you can elaborate a bit more about everything you're interested in. But as you see also in the end, you have countries like Cuba, you have Iran, you have Saudi Arabia, and of course, I think worth mentioning is the situation in Gaza and what has happened. Palestine is now one of the 10 worst countries, the most dangerous countries to be a journalist in. The Israeli forces has killed more than 100 journalists or reporters, where at least 22 were doing their job as reporters when they were killed. So this has also made Israel jump down a couple of steps. They used to be the number 1 in the Middle East region. Now it's actually Qatar that is better in this index than Israel.
Can you say something about the United States place?
Yes. I'm coming to that. And I'm so sorry. This is so bad, but there's not time for questions. I'm really sorry. I would have loved to do that. We just don't have the time. But yes, I can say now about the United States, and they have actually gone down 10 places. And this is really, really serious because the whole section of has been coming the worst. They're coming to the next sort of level of seriousness, and this is very much due to the way of certain people using the media as trying to make people not trust media and what's being said in media. And we also have political persons who really encourage to imprison journalists in the United States. So yeah, we can have a look at a bit about some of the significant elements, and there you see the United States are going down from the 45th place to the 55th place. And here you see, if we start, there's also, I mean, we shouldn't forget, there are also happening some good things out there in the world. And you see some of the countries that has risen quite a lot. And often it has to do, like in Chile and Tanzania, it has to do with governments or policies that has been really, really changing and really trying to make it as a safe place for journalists to work again. So, and this is happening in both Chile and Tanzania, and it can also be like a whole new government or whole new political situation in the country, which is the example of Poland and Bulgaria, which has made it possible for them to really jump up. And when it comes to the bad situation, it's the same, but the opposite, so to speak. You have leaders that are really, really after the free media, that are really after journalists, that really want to suppress the free world, like in Argentina with this new president and his hunt on journalists, you can say. He for instance, he shut down the biggest news agency in the country. We also have Georgia there with a government that is really fueling the sort of polarization. And we have also why countries can go down so much in many places, like in Afghanistan, where lots of journalists have been imprisoned and also actually been killed. And just to say something quickly, very quickly or briefly, about the regional development in the world. If we see Africa here, they have had a lot of suppress in their elections and a very bad situation for both the media and the ability to express yourself, and also for the individual journalists, and especially during the elections. And you have it especially in Togo, Nigeria, Madagascar, Democratic Republic of Congo, Gabon, and Zimbabwe. And if you have the Asia Pacific, we see that it's this is the world's, I think it's the second most difficult region to be a journalist in. And you see that 26 of the 32 countries and territories has dropped their score in the index. And if we come to the Americas, More than half of the countries in the region have seen the situation deteriorate, and almost all the South American countries are now so-called problematic countries when it comes to press freedom. And in Central Asia and Europe, we have seen the way of the Kremlin's negative political influence extend also to especially Eastern Europe. Serbia, for instance, can be mentioned as an example. But we also see a lot of censorship, and we see a lot of different kind of laws or accusations being done against journalists. And it's called like you're threatening the national security, etc. And we see this especially in countries like Belarus and Kyrgyzstan and Azerbaijan and so on. And North Africa, Middle East, it's very serious situation in nearly half of the countries. Impunity is almost total there when it comes to attacks on journalists, and it's done in systematic ways. So, to very, very short sum up the index for 2024, Reporters Without Borders' main message is that journalism and press freedom is under political pressure. And we can say this, and we can see this, because out of the 5 indicators that I told about in the beginning, we see that the one ranking the kind of democracy, the political one, is the one that is falling the most, 7.6 points in average. And the governments, many governments do not stand for what they should stand for in the sense of protecting the independent media and independent journalism. Quite the opposite. In like 75% of the countries that we have been investigated, there are reports of the political authorities interfering and trying to make political campaigns and disinformation campaigns and propaganda campaigns, especially when it comes to elections that is taking place. And this is especially worrying a year like 2024. It's called the super election year, as I guess you know. It's half of, I think is it half of the population living in countries will go to vote or have been voting this year. And Maria Ressa, who got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021, she's the one who has been talking about this and warning about the situation this year. And she has said that at the end of 2024, we'll see if democracy has survived or if it has died. And with those words, 2 persons who really knows how it is to be working in countries with no democracy. Please welcome up on stage Nahid Persson Sarvestani and Alesha Shamagun. Thank you so much. I think it's better that you introduce yourselves, actually, and if you give us a bit about, maybe we can start with you, Nahid, and the background, what you've been doing. You're a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker.
Okay. I was born in Iran and took asylum in Sweden. The night when the police rushed in our home and took my 2 younger brothers, Rostam, 17, and Jawad, 15, I wasn't at home. After 6 months, they executed my older brother, older, 17 years, and if I was home, I wasn't alive right now. So when I came to Sweden, it was my responsibility to be voice of my brother and my people in Iran. So I began to make film about Iran, but after 17 years, I went back to Iran. It was not easy. They took my passport. They took a lot of money of my parents to let me be there, but I was under their control all the time. But I could film anyway. So, you know, in Iran, people are so
good to do what they be said not to do. So
they find ways.
Yeah, yeah. So I began to make a film about prostitution in Iran. They say that it's illegal, but even the mullah, the authorities, they buy sex from them to just read a meaning sentence from Quran, and they get married for a half hour or 1 hour. So after that, so I went back to Iran 2006, but they put me in house arrest, and they threatened me to kill me and everything. But I had the chance that the Sweden had very good contact with Iran, which I don't like. But in that case, it was good for me because I could leave Iran after 2 months. So after that, I made film, and my last film, I cannot say, my film that you can see tonight at the festival is about Ruhollah Zam, exile journalist in France. So he was son of a mullah, a very high-level mullah who worked with Khamenei, but he himself was opposed the regime and put in jail 2009. When he came back, when he was released from prison, he just left the country to France and started a news channel, Ahmad News, and exposed the money laundering in Iran, exposed what happened in Iran, because he had so good connection with a lot of people inside the regime. So they gave him secret document, and the regime tried to kill him many times in France, but he got protection of France police, and I was there and filmed him about everything, but the regime didn't succeed to kill him, but they took another way to infiltrate people in his work. So I think Russia learned Iran a lot about how to do that. So his closest friends were from the regime, but he didn't know that. So they lured him to Iraq, and he was kidnapped to Iran. After 14 months in prison, he was executed.
Yes, thank you. And now you're based in Sweden and
yeah,
still
I'm
works.
based in Sweden.
Yeah.
I am going around the world, and we show my film right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Alessia?
Hello, everybody. My name is Alessia Shmagun. I'm an investigative reporter covering corruption and money laundering around the world, but mainly in Russia. I have been working with major Russian and international media, including Novaya Gazeta, where I spend most of my time. And I was part of such projects as Panama Papers, what become maybe their biggest revelation of secret Putin's wealth. And in offshore, we found the whole multi-billion empire managed by his close friend, musician Sergei Roldugin. I also uncovered a villa situated in French Biarritz that belonged to Putin's ex-wife, now ex-wife Lyudmila. And this villa just recently has been arrested as part of effort to freeze Putin's personal assets in Europe. So for the last 10 years, I've been doing this classical follow the money watchdog journalism. And for my work in Russia, I have been proclaimed a foreign agent. And since then, the organization I was working with, Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, was proclaimed undesirable. And another organization I co-founded also was proclaimed undesirable. Now, Russian courts fined me several times for not complying with foreign agent law. And I face risks of criminal prosecution in Russia, and I live in exile in Riga.
So if you would go back, you would be in prison?
No, it's You can never say this
You never know.
about Russia. Yeah, there is no rules. Like they can or cannot prosecute
Yeah.
you. They can or cannot put you in jail or just, give you huge fines that you can repay.
Yeah. Can you just say also a bit about, tell us a bit about Novaya Gazeta?
Right. So when the full-scale invasion started, many journalists, I think all independent media, was forced to leave Russia, and Novaya Gazeta was not an exemption. But we, like the team, split it into parts, and older people decided to stay in Russia to comply with all the laws, even with some censorship, to be able to continue do the work from their earth, right? And another part of our editorial team left, and we're now living in different cities in Europe, like we split it across Europe a little bit. Yeah, and we continue doing our work as Novaya Gazeta Europe. These two entities split it for security reasons mainly. So there are two brands now.
Two brands, but the same in one way.
Yeah, of course we keep in contact with each other.
So if we're moving on to the situation for press freedom, or the lack of it, if you tell us a bit your impression of this night in Iran, how bad is it, and in what way?
Unfortunately, prison, Iran is like a big prison for everybody, especially for journalists and filmmakers. Some of my friends are right now in prison. One of them died 2 years ago, 3 years ago in Corona, because they didn't want to take care of him, so he died. So, and you can see that if any journalist or filmmaker daring and breaking the censorship and daring challenging the regime, they ended in prison, they be tortured, but we have also citizen journalists in Iran, so it's banned to film or to get report from Iran or to outside the country. But what we get from the citizen journalists, normal people. During the uprising Women Life Freedom, Ghazaleh, who who was attending the protest and filmed the crowd, the security forces, they shoot her, and his last minute of the film is his last minute of her life. So it happens, and people are, people who are, journalists and filmmaker professional, they now working underground. Some people asking me that why it doesn't happen anything in Iran right now, but it does, not in same way that people go in the street, but we do a lot. So Iranians are like a bomb. So when it's time, it will be exploded.
Thank you. And in Russia, I know you told me that even 2 years ago, it's been bad for a long time, but 2 years ago, you wouldn't imagine that it's been this situation.
Right. I just, when I listening to Nahid, I realized that the only way to make you feel better about your country and the situation with freedom of speech is to put you in a panel with someone from Iran. It's it's terrible. No, but of course, right, as I've been saying, I've been doing this for many years, and we always been complaining about the situation with freedom of speech. But yeah, even 2 years ago, I didn't see it would deteriorate so significantly in such a short period of time. So I would say when they started their full-scale invasion of Ukraine, simultaneously they engaged in full-blown attack on media freedom. And according to some estimates, now Putin has reached their Soviet-style Brezhnev-era level of repressions against political opponents. Like there are, for the last 2 years, there were hundreds, like several hundreds of cases against people who publicly expressed their discontent with the military action. Hundreds of thousands media sources were blocked in Russia, including major outlets like Meduza, Novaya Gazeta Europe, BBC Russian servers. So they're cutting all the ties between the big world and what's going on in Russia, right? And like you can be prosecuted for writing an article. This is like usual, right? For making photographs. For instance, just recently there was a series of arrests of people who were making photos in court hearings. And they were basically like the only link to people who decided to stay in Russia, even facing like, you know, huge sentences. And just people who were making photos are now considered being extremists or whatever they want to charge them with. But you can also be prosecuted for just talking to press. And one person was recently arrested and sentenced for for his engagement in vox populi kind of talk with media. Like he just said something like, I didn't like the fact that Russian army is destroying peaceful Ukrainian cities. And police found him and considered him guilty of how do they call it, like discreditation of Russian army. So it's bad. It's terrible.
Yeah, I've heard something about like 15-year sentences for if you sort of say something about the security for the state or.
Yeah, but they deploy all the methods they have in their toolbox, and yeah, again, it's very random. You can go out of the court with like conditional sentence when you go free, but you consider it being guilty, right? But an opposition politician, Ilya Yashin, for his stream about Bucha, events in Bucha, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. And yeah, Navalny was sentenced for 20 years, which he didn't survive.
And if you compare it like 10 years ago, I mean, how
No.
what has
Yeah, I remember like I've been part of such panels before, and everybody was asking like, is it dangerous in Russia? And I was like, oh, well, yes and no, because I could still go, and I have never received any threat, even though I was involved in big investigations against very high people. Like it wasn't easy back then, but now it's impossible to do your work being inside the country. So that's why I think all independent media in like 1 month, they just left to continue doing their work.
Yeah, when you listen to each other, what kind of similarities or differences do you think of? Do you have any own reflections?
I can't I can't imagine how it is in Russia, but as you say, it's impossible to do it in Iran, to report in Iran, and even outside Iran, because we see that just 3 weeks ago, one of our colleagues in Iranian who worked for Iran International, he was attacked by a knife outside his home because he is one of the most popular reporter in TV for Iranian. And even, you see, Ruhollah was killed in another way, but we are not safe. When I came to Sweden, I thought, oh, now I can live a peaceful life, but I can't. I cannot do that, because every time I go out, I have to look back, is somebody there, or I have camera around my house. So it's not normal. be in Sweden and be afraid for your life. I think it's all of us in the room's responsibility to change it, because Europe they are very silent. You cannot see so much about Iran in media. And when the uprising Women Life Freedom, when it happened, I sent a lot, because I've got a lot of videos from citizen journalists, and they wanted us to publish it and asked this TV to publish it. But they said, no, we are not sure that it's from the regime, that they were killed. We saw that the police killed them, but they didn't want to publish it. So that's why we Iranians have to do everything to be our people's voice. It's sad, it's very sad.
And also the newsroom has to employ people who speak Persian, Farsi, or languages, not just not understanding.
Absolutely.
Any reflections when you listen to Naif?
I would agree with everything you just said, and especially about the common responsibility, right? Because as someone said, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, because you cannot contain this in one country. And we see how it's splitting from Russia to European countries, where GRU officers killing people, interrogating people. So this one part of it, but the other part of it that I can say because I was covering it for many years, is how the money flows from Russia also, at least were before the full-scale invasion, they were splitting everywhere, corrupting politicians in Europe. And we need to pay more attention to it, and also about employing people who speak Farsi or employing people who speak Russian. It's also important because we can help with sanctions, right? With, oh my God, I'm thinking that it's another criminal offense that I'm now committing in Russia, because you cannot advocate for more sanctions. So anyway, right, it's very important to face it together, and not only us from Iran and Russia, but also people like you here. When I listen to you, I'm very sad, but I think, as I said, even 2 years ago in Russia, it wasn't as bad as now, and now I would say it's not yet as bad as in Iran, because they do not kill people like this in the streets in Russia in big amounts.
Putin and Khamenei,
they learn from each other.
They backing each other. They support each other. Because Khamenei sent a drone to Ukraine to kill people there, and Putin helped Khamenei for the technology, how to fake news and everything. So when you see the dictators are more united than democratic countries.
Yeah, that's true.
So how can we counteract that? What can we do to?
I think as people from each countries, we have to pressure our government to add the Revolutionary Guard in Iran a terrorist organization, because they don't do that. Sweden did that, but not other European countries. We have to do that. If they say no, we cannot do that because we have business with them. So be aware that next year, you are going to have terrorism in all countries. You can see extremist Muslim that you cannot. We have some places in Sweden, outside Stockholm, that women cannot go without hijab because the men and from the Iranian government, they put people outside country to control women outside country. So we have to act. We cannot just let it be. because Iranian or Islamic Republic, they are like coronavirus. So they don't just stay in Iran. They spread whole the world if we don't do anything.
Yeah, well, I was reported without borders. We released a report about the UK and how bad Iranian journalists are being harassed and threatened and experience violence. And this also happens, as you say, in other countries. What's your impression of how huge or little is this? How much is the repression going on?
Yeah, the press
for
is
exiled
a lot.
journalists.
You talk about journalists in UK, the Iranian. We have a very big TV channel, Iran International, but they were threatened and they had to move the whole station to Washington because all of them they were afraid to be killed because of that. So it's a huge all the countries outside Iran even because they don't want that we are the people's voice, and every time somebody they try to kill one of us, so we get stronger. Many other stand up for the journalists.
And this is also in your film. Ruhollah also experienced this a lot. This sense of always being hunted, kind of thing, even though in France.
Yeah, you know, Ruhollah was a son of a mullah who could live in luxury like other mullah's son, because money laundering it goes from the mullahs to other countries, and he could also be rich, but he lives in a small apartment. He's also, always in the phone and get news, and his family is under pressure, everything, but he decided to be a voice of people. So he was so courageous.
And your own experience of having threats, what can you say about that?
Yeah, all Iranian has, but you know, they sent me every time I make film about Iran. They sent a letter to my box or digital that they are going to do this or that to my family and me. When I made Prostitution Behind the Veil, the first film about Iran, my daughter was 8 years, and she was followed by a man all the way from our home to the school. But she had a mobile, so she called us and told about that. And they messed with my car, so when I wanted to go from Stockholm to Uppsala, so it was broken in the way. So they tried to scare us. And even they called Swedish television, SVT, and don't send the film because it's not the right film, it's not a documentary, it's fiction film. So they think they can even have control over media in Sweden. But unfortunately, if we don't stop them, they are going to have it.
And Alicia, what can you say about the situation you are living under?
I would say so far so good, even if it sounds a little bit like silly. But of course, we all aware of the fact that we generally under danger. And you just said that it's not right that you are in Stockholm, but you still fear for your life. But I would say it's not normal if you're in Russia or in Iran and fear for your life, right? So, but yeah, it's like, it's like that. You just like have to face this fact. And many of my friends now become more cautious about social networks, about, you know, just revealing information about your movements. So it's like something you always had in mind when you do your normal life.
Yeah, and I don't dare to go to countries like Turkey, Cyprus, or even if I buy a ticket to other countries, I don't buy from Qatar, for example, because they work to each other. And I don't go to Russia, of course, because they cooperate with each other.
Can you tell us something about Dmitry Muratov, who was also the Nobel Peace Prize award in 2021 with Maria Ressa? What's his situation?
So Dmitry Andreevich is in Moscow, in Russia. He decided to stay, even though he was proclaimed a foreign agent, but he had to step out as editor-in-chief, not to put in the additional danger Novaya Gazeta in Moscow. But he's now doing what we call public diplomacy. So he's continue to try to help people in need, because I think many people in Russia know that Dmitry Muratov is the person who would help you no matter what, trying to employ all the influence that he has as a Nobel Peace Laureate and as editor-in-chief of one of the best newspapers in Russia.
What would you say is the most challenging with working in exile as a journalist?
Right. So there are many challenges, but I would say the most frustrating thing is that you cannot go there to see people. You cannot, because it's so important in journalistic work, right? To be at the place, to see it with your own eyes, to be able to to talk to people, to persuade people. Because when you see someone like somebody, you can have very different result from when you just calling people or writing in social networks. So this is very, very challenging, and a lot of journalists feeling very frustrated about this. But also, of course, the question of funding is important. So far, Novaya Gazeta, for instance, we are in a good condition. We have salaries for some period of time, but we want to do more. We want to rebuild our investigative department now in exile. We want to engage in bigger projects. It's all takes money, and we are basically depending on several sources. So that's another thing. But generally, yeah, of course, you miss your country. You want to be with people, and also it's not very nice feeling that you being labeled as as a foe of your own country, because of course we are not.
Yeah, can you elaborate a bit more on this foreign agent law? For instance, Georgia is also talking about having the kind of same thing now. How does it work?
Yeah, so it's a law. They can proclaim a foreign agent, basically any person. So every Friday, it's just a custom. It's not like it's in the law, but every Friday we know that a new set of people would be proclaimed foreign agents. So,
how is that presented? How do they do that?
They publish a list of people on their so-called Ministry of Justice website.
Interesting.
So yeah, every Friday they publish a new list. So you have to put a disclaimer on every public appearance of yours, even if it's just a photo of your 4-year-old daughter, that you are a foreign agent. And
so even private photos.
Yeah, right. So when I was still trying to comply with the law, yeah, any photo in Instagram, my daughter playing with toys, was accompanied by the disclaimer that, yeah, by the way, I'm a foreign agent. This is one thing. Also, every 3 months you have to report your expenses and your revenues to the Ministry of Justice. Yeah, that's it. So it doesn't seem so terrible, right? But when the war started, I realized I cannot just put this label no matter what, because it's so infuriating that they started a war and and you still have to comply with these stupid rules. But also some people try to comply, but they still find them maybe the disclaimer is not big enough, or it's not the first thing in your post and the second thing. So there are some ways to find how to prosecute you anyway. So, and at first you got just a fine, monetary, not small, but then after 2 fines you face criminal prosecution up to like 5 years in prison.
But, and this is a very stupid question, because how can you answer for the whole Russia? But I mean, what do people not being journalists think about this system? I mean, how's the discussion in different?
That's a good question. The answer is we don't know, because there is no trustworthy public opinions, especially in times of war. But yeah, I think it differs from person to person, from city to city. Of course, there are like significant group of people who see it as a badge of honor. If they proclaimed you foreign agent, that means you have done something really significant and good. But I think that for big audience, especially like in distant areas, or people who doesn't know about politics much, who doesn't interested in this, of course, when they see or hear that somebody is foreign agent, that of course like threaten them, like I don't want to be involved in any of this. So of course it's not only humiliating, it's of course an obstacle in your journalistic work, because you do not always talk to your supporters. You want the audience you really want to reach. It's someone who doesn't trust you by the default, right? And this label, of course, prevent this from happening.
And if you, sorry, what do you want?
No, you asked me before about making film and if there is any danger for us to do that. When I see in Iran that my people, they face gun and bullets, they face torture, they face rape and execution. So you cannot be, you cannot feel fear for your life miles away from Iran. So that's why all the journalists, exiled journalists, they do everything to do that. What's scaring us is that the Iranian regime, the dictator, still alive or in power, and the European countries, they are very quiet about that. And every time instead of they shaking hand with the Iranian people, they shaking hand with the regime who kill Iranian people. So as far as they do that, I don't say that Iranian people will overthrow the regime someday, but it will cost lots of life if Europe and other Western countries have business with Iran and have a negotiation with them, because it shows that diplomacy doesn't help Iran. So it comes to us, to other countries, so we have to be active about that.
And one case now is when it comes to the freedom of speech or lack of freedom of speech. We talked, I think, about Tomasz.
Yeah, Tomasz Salehi. So, as I said before, many artists and filmmakers and journalists are in prison right now. Tomasz Salehi is a rapper that people love him because he is the voice of all Iranian, and he made many songs for women life, freedom, and he ended in prison. And 1 month ago, they let him go. And when he came out from prison, he published a video that he talked how they torture him, what they did to him. And after just 12 days, they arrested him again. And now he is sentenced to death just because he is a singer. So he didn't do anything. If you Google him, Tomasz Salehi, you can see he is so wonderful. Everybody loves him.
We only have a couple of minutes left, but if both of you could say something, what you think about the future in the respective countries. Yeah.
In Iran, my hope is people. I have hope that, because if you see after the uprising Women Life Freedom, you can see, despite that moralities, police are everywhere in Iran, in every corner of the street, the woman goes out without hijab. It's not easy, because I talked to my sister, she was sitting in a car and driving without hijab. I was more afraid than she. And she said, I asked her, aren't you afraid? She said, yes, I am. But if I put my hijab, it means that they won, because we are forward now. So step by step, people want to overthrow the regime. So my hope is young people, very young people.
Hope to the young people.
Yeah.
And Alicia?
I don't know. I'm not so optimistic about people, and I actually have a lot of respect for Iranians who continue to fight. And it's been how many years? Like 30 years?
45 years.
Oh my God. So, because like when you under surveillance and constantly under threat, it's very hard to be so, brave and like care about freedom of speech. So, yeah, but I think you also raised a very important point about like how other world treat politicians from Russia, for instance, and Russians from Russia. Because after the war started, there was some concerns about like people who emigrate, how would they be treated in Europe? Like it's okay, but still like anti-war movement in Russia, they need all the help, they need support from Europe, because they are trying to fight what is coming for all of Europe, as we can see in Ukraine. So the only way I see how it might change is if we all like unite and will be like the one front against these regimes.
Yeah, because our people, they do everything they can do, and they are waiting for us outside country that we are free, we can do it. I don't know what stop all the European countries that don't cut the relationship with Iran, because if they do that, the regime will die. It depends on you.
Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your experience.
Thank you for having.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you everyone who has listened. Thank you to the organizers and everyone online. And please support Reporters Without Borders. Without press freedom, no democracy.
Thank you so much for that, Ami. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Ami Hedenberg, Nahid Persson Sevestani, and Olesia Shmagun for sharing and all this information and your stories. We very much hear your call to action. And I think we should remind ourselves what's at stake. We know that when democracy fails these days, it's not because the military or the guerrilla comes from outside, it fails from within, it's attacked from within. And the first thing that is destroyed is freedom of speech. That is the first thing that people that want to create an undemocratic society attacks. So I think the very disturbing figures that you have been showing us today, where we're sliding, and what you are telling us is a harsh reminder to all of us to stand up for democracy and the freedom of speech today. It's urgent and it's important. So thank you so much to the Czech Embassy and the Swedish Embassy and One World International Human Rights Film Festival. I also remind you that the film will be shown today at Cinematheque at 6 o'clock. Thank you so much to the audience and you that followed us on screen. And I would also encourage you to visit our exhibition about Narges Mohammadi and women, life, freedom. It's about the struggle and the freedom fight that Narges have been part of, but that the whole Iranian society activists have been fighting for freedom. So it's an interesting exhibition we have on display. And I also want to remind you that we are ending the celebration and focus on Narges Mohammadi's Peace Prize on September 5th with our Peace Prize Festival and conference. So you're heartily welcome back on the final conference focusing on this issue at that time. So save the date, and I wish you a wonderful Friday and a weekend coming up. Thank you so much for coming here today.